and welcome to the show. I'm Eric Murphy.
I'm V. LaBianca.
This is Skeptic Generation, and we need to talk. Hey, V.
Hello.
Oh, man. So before we dive into calls, I know we live together, but it's nice to kind of check in and let people have a bit of an inside look into how things are going in our lives. How's your week been?
My week has been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I've been at once very productive and very lazy, if that makes any sense at all.
I've seen you this week, and all I've seen is productive, to be honest.
I haven't been feeling it.
Okay.
Okay. How are you? You've got something big coming up this upcoming week.
I do, and I even titled the name of the episode, The Big Thing That I've Got Coming Up This Week. And I know that this is something that a lot of people have been doing, and it's something that I'm doing. And because we have a platform, I thought it would be good to kind of be public about how things are impacting our personal lives. And the fact is, after the Roe v. Wade decision, I'm going to get snipped. I'm getting a vasectomy this upcoming week. And right. Yep. You know what? I think it's going to be good. I'm ready. I know that next week I probably might not be in a good mood. Might be icing my balls. But when we live in a place where autonomy is not taken into account, it affects everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And living in a state like Texas, where, gosh, there was a neighboring town where there were literal Nazis just chilling outside of a library a few weeks ago, like with the Nazi flags and everything, like not hyperbole.
Yep. Yep, that is.
You know, where school shootings are within a few hours drive of exactly where we are, and where if you leave the city, couple of the first things you'll see are signs telling you that you're going to hell. It does feel very, very personal, and it is very, very scary. And so taking action to make sure that you are okay and you are safe is important. And for those of you who are feeling that way, you're not alone. We're there too, and I wish that I had good news. I wish that I could take it away. But the best I can do is say that we're here with you, you know? Yeah, Eric's getting a what? He's getting a vasectomy, he's getting snipped. And
yeah, you and Kevin Stein on the episode that the two of you did together talked a lot about that.
Mm-hmm.
And since y'all have both gone and done it.
I don't know if that's not necessarily something Kevin wanted to say on the air to a bunch of people.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Sorry.
In 2 weeks, I'm getting a hysterectomy, so
Well, there goes the title of the next episode.
No, it'll just be V is getting a what.
Yeah, fair enough.
I've been talking about this for over a year. This has been an ongoing conversation, and unlike you, who could call and be like, hey,
yeah,
I want a vasectomy, and they're like, that's cool, come in next Monday. I had to go through 7-8 months of just rigorous hurdle jumping.
Denial after denial after denial after denial.
But it's happening. Fingers crossed.
Yeah,
in a couple of weeks.
It is just the weirdest thing. It's just like, oh, we don't think that you know what you're talking about, so you should have kids.
Right. It's like, we need to make sure that you're mentally stable enough to not have children. It's like, I feel like that's not how things should go.
No.
But anyway, Eric's going first, so I'm going to be on bedside duty first.
Yep. If I am just pale or I'm just not feeling good come next Sunday, you will know why. But other than that, I don't know. This week has been really, really reaffirming. I've been able to, in other filmmaking endeavors of mine, stuff through work, I've been able to learn and also use the skills that I've developed doing this show and doing, other stuff to it just felt really good. I realized that I do have a specialized skill set, and so that's been really, really affirming this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But before we dive into calls, we do want to say, hey, everybody, if you like what we do, but you're sick of the fucking ads, consider going to patreon.com/skeptic generation. That's patreon.com/skeptic generation, where we do an ad-free version of the podcast and of the live show. Not only that, but we have a couple other little goodies. So check us out, patreon.com/skeptic generation. One of those things is the weekly caption contest. People have been saying, hey, we don't see the faces that you're necessarily doing in the thumbnails lately. Why?
But you can.
Yeah. Well, we found out that we talked about that last week, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just easier to pose for it, but we also goof around and you get to see that and all of that good stuff. So we would appreciate it. And by the way, hey, did y'all know we have a podcast? Like, seriously, I was talking to somebody who's been watching the show for several months this week, and they were just like, I really wish I could just listen to y'all on my drive home. And I was like, well, we have a podcast that I put a lot of work into every single week. And it just blew their mind. Go to your local, whatever podcast aggregator, if it's iTunes, if it's a Google Podcasts or Stitcher or Podkicker or whatever the case may be, we're there. And we would be happy to keep you company on your drive home or whatever that is. If you are on a podcast app, though, leave us a good review. We'd appreciate it. Other than that, let's dive into calls. Hey, V, who should we take first?
We have a couple callers. We've got 2 Stevens and a Connor currently.
Okay. Okay. Just the title, Are the Pollies Okay? is making me laugh so hard.
All right.
Are the Pollies okay?
Well, I can't speak for all pollies, but...
Stephen in New York, you're live with Eric and V.
Hey guys, I figured I would get the meme out of the way immediately and just let that one fall where it lay.
Okay.
Eric, wonderful to see you again. Glad that you're feeling better. V and I decided that through our heathen tendencies to telepathically do a ritual for you so you could get better, but we'll keep that one. I called a couple weeks ago and tried to contend with V on some political stuff and couldn't do it. V was far too agreeable, and I wanted to lodge a formal complaint.
Yes.
That's fair.
That we couldn't contend with anything. Anyway, so yeah, I figured we'd call because... Go ahead, Howard.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, in the future, you can file complaints about V to our cat, Moko.
Okay, we'll do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Go ahead.
Anyway. So I just wanted to, talk to you guys about polyamory and the difficulties that we face in a mono world and the problems I've been facing very recently. I actually just got out of a relationship because of those issues. And sometimes looking at the problems I was having, not, focusing too much on names or anything, that, I'm living in a society that says to me that I should be monogamous. Mm-hmm. And I don't have those feelings. Like as I say, I don't think love is a commodity that can be, it's not a finite resource for me. No one ever tells me that I should pick one parent or if I had siblings, one sibling that I should love. Why should I feel that way towards people romantically? But at the same time, there are people that I love that have grown up with those ideals. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I feel like, am I being the selfish ones for trying to make it so that other people are okay with my not normal way of, in this society, not normal way of romance. So I guess that's where we can start.
Yeah. So for people who are in the live chat wondering, poly what? Polyamory. It is ethical non-monogamy, recognizing that you can love more than one person, and that you can have consensual, informed, incredibly valuable relationships with more than one person, and that doesn't make you any less. And that is something that I had to deconstruct for years before I ever gave it a try. And by the time I gave it a try, I realized, oh my goodness, I don't know why I waited so long. I think one of the things that really gets me is, and I know this is just us agreeing with each other, and it's probably not great radio, so we probably won't be able to talk for too long. But one of the things that gets me there is this, I think one of the things that got in my way the most was being like, I will be jealous. And that jealousy would hurt the relationship. You know, if I'm with another, if my partner's with another person. Luckily, that hasn't been the case. I've actually been really excited for V in the past. But if that is the case, I was talking to someone, Murray LePage, who also puts out great content. If you haven't checked out Murray, do. Marie told me that if I'm feeling jealous or if I'm feeling insecure, why am I making the other person own my jealousy? And why am I making someone else be responsible for my negative feelings? Isn't that something that I need to figure out what's going on and work through? Because if it is a lack of confidence on my part, I can't have someone else solve my lack of confidence. And that was a watershed moment for me. I don't know, what do you think, B?
Well, New York just passed a law that relationships involving more than two people can have the same legal protections as couples.
Nice.
Which is,
because New York is the most based state in the union. That is true.
It is pretty cool from what I have seen. So we are, it feels like, moving in a direction where even if the majority of the population isn't going to, decide to sync Google calendars, right? At least it becomes a viable option and one that is legally protected. I think that a lot of the pushback that I have gotten has been from people who consider themselves to be liberal, who consider themselves to be humanist, who consider themselves to have moved away from a lot of the more traditional and oppressive worldviews that maybe they came from or their families are still involved in. And I just generally like to ask, like, why is this something that, like, makes you upset? What about this makes you recoil? And, like, go after that.
Yeah.
Look deeper at that. It's kind of like my life motto. If this thing makes me uncomfortable, that means I need to look at it more closely. So I think that we still have a long way to go. But thanks to people like you who are willing to talk about it, and states like New York that are willing to make it a viable option legally, I think we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, it really is just conversations like this, being open and talking about it. Stephen, I have no idea whether or not the people in your life are going to be more or less receptive, but hopefully the more people talk about this kind of thing, then the less taboo it becomes. It's interesting. It feels like it's so not talked about that at some point it will be, and it's going to be a hot button issue. But for now,
it's talked about on honestly, TikTok is where it's at right now with
Yep.
polyamorous kind of theory and relationship theory and therapy. There's somebody who calls monogamy a kink. I was like, oh, it's fine if you like monogamy, but, like, it's a kink. It's like a power dynamic kink, and it's an ownership kink, and, like,
Yeah.
totally down for that. But for you to say that I need to have your kink is very weird. So, like, it makes the you should only have one partner conversation very different. But again, like, kind of inflammatory.
I really don't know how to make a lot of statements about my TikTok because I am so deeply, like, into I am just cubbied right into neurodivergent, indigenous, poly, atheist TikTok. I and in queer TikTok, just all the way across. I don't know.
One of the wildest things I had happened while I was in that last relationship was, in the beginning, they had decided to go out with one of their exes and do some drinking. And while they were doing it, they were texting me like, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to happen. And then the next day, they called me crying, saying that something did happen. And my first response was, well, did you have fun? And they were absolutely shocked. Mm-hmm. And it was like 10 minutes of me explaining, like, I don't care. Like, if you had fun and as long as you were safe, it's whatever. Unfortunately, they weren't able to give me the same leeway. And that's where everything kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
That kind of feels like a red flag to me already, though.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if like what's important is the contract that you make with the other person. And so long as both of you agree to a thing and stick to that thing, then you should be okay. But if that person is deceiving themselves before they even get to the part where they're deceiving you, then if they can't be honest with themselves about what's going to happen and what they want, then it sounds like that person has a lot of work to do on figuring that out, so that they can eventually get to the point that they can communicate that with you,
Right.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I'm with somebody now that's a lot more understanding, and in fact, they are also, I think, poly, but they haven't really. They're still trying to figure that out. I guess my main contention in this entire to try to make this a little bit more argumentative as the chat so wants it to be.
Let's do that, and we'll probably end with that. That way we can move on. We do have a couple of religious callers we want to get to as well.
Of course, you want to put them over me. I see how it is.
Hey, we took you first. All right, what do you got?
Anyway, okay. So how about this? One of the things that occurred during that relationship was that I was called a polygamist by my partner. I view that as a slur.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you have sister wives?
No, I don't have any sisters, so I don't know how that would work
out.
Oh,
no. I mean,
yeah, I know. I was making a joke.
Are you married to like a bunch of sister wives? Is there just like a what's that movie where they're all wearing the red and the anyway,
that's not polygamy.
Doesn't. Well. No. I'm just archaic, weird bullshit. Yeah, no, I think that feels like a slur.
I mean, it's a different word. It's not applicable unless you are actually married to multiple people. Polygamy is marriage to multiple people. And like that is also very religious. Like it has a religious connotation. So if you consider it something that is absolutely not something someone should call you, we'll absolutely respect that.
Yeah.
But yeah, to my understanding, if you say that you are polygamous, like that is an outdated term for a very specific thing and doesn't actually have anything to do with ethical non-monogamy.
No.
So. Right. I think that it comes with a lot of connotations of like oppressive, patriarchal, like, umbrella over a polyamorous relationship, whatever that may be, where only men are allowed to marry multiple, usually very young women who, and then they have absolute control of how that works out. So when I got called that, it was it hurt quite a bit, especially from who it was coming from. I've always, and kind of taking that further, like putting those connotations upon me felt like, I don't know, almost like being called I don't know what's a good analogy here.
If you're searching for a slur, we can be generic and let the audience fill one in.
Yeah.
But
I was even looking for a slur. I was more looking for like an ideological, like being called a being called a Stalinist because I believe in,
Socialized medicine.
tendencies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff
But,
like that. Like all those connotations of that just get piled on top of you.
Yeah, agreed. Hey, Stephen.
Yep.
I wish we had more time, but I do want to make sure we get to
It's fine.
some of the
I
other
understand,
callers.
guys.
Sorry for being
I love you
agreeable
both.
again.
Yeah, we don't. We got to find stuff we disagree on. The format requires it.
I'm gonna do some research, and I'll look into both of your backgrounds, and I'll just try to find something.
That's not creepy at all. Thanks, Steve.
Just don't get us. Just don't
Hey,
get
you're
us
on social
demonetized.
media. It's not private anymore.
This is fair. All right.
Take care.
All right, love you both. I'll talk to you next time.
Sounds
Bye.
good. Bye. Yeah. There was one thing I wanted to add, but I know that we need to get into other conversations, so I was just holding it until afterward.
Okay.
And that is, if somebody calls you a slur, say, hey, that's a slur and that's really offensive. If the person doesn't care, they have entirely showed their true colors. You don't need to engage with them because they've shown that they do not care about that. But if somebody calls you something that you take as a slur and you say, hey, that's incredibly offensive, and they listen, then that can be a good place to find more solid ground to move conversations forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for people who think, oh, well, I'm embarrassed to say something, say, hey, you know what, that was really, really offensive. Why? Who are you trying to protect? And if you're trying to protect a relationship with someone who doesn't care about your feelings and your well-being, they don't deserve that protection. Okay, so I chose the Are the Polys Okay? Who are we taking next?
Well, we've got two theists, both of whom have called before.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I'm going to prioritize Sajid just
Yay!
because we did ask him to call back, and
Yep.
he did.
Our
and
favorite Canadian Muslim.
I'm so excited to talk to Sajid. All right, let me
Yeah.
see. Here we go.
Oh.
Boom, ba-doom.
Uh-huh. So it says that that you want to talk about some doubts with Islam? Islam?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. What's going on?
I've just recently been really struggling a lot with what I believe and why I believe it, and just really questioning a lot of things. It's been really weighing on me, to be honest.
Oh, man. So I don't know if you call it this, but in my church, we called it a crisis of faith. If there's a problem, it's got to be a crisis, right? Like, oh, that is such a rough period and place to be at. I'm sorry to hear that you're feeling that. That is definitely a painful experience.
Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah.
I've been better.
So do you want to talk about it, or how can we help?
There's a certain, like, I consider myself Muslim, but to be honest, I didn't really ever consider myself super religious or like mystical, and I don't know if I want to use the term spiritual or not, but
Yeah.
and there's always things that have been, I'm a bit of a iconoclast, if you know what that means. I don't like things that I don't think are just don't make sense and I think are ridiculous. And there's some traditions and stuff in Islam I think are quite silly.
Yeah. I mean, different religions, same problem. Like, I'm 100% on the same page. I experienced that too. What are some of the, because I don't know if this was your experience, but for me, there were things that at first were just like, oh, well, that's kind of weird. Or, I don't know if that makes sense to me. Other things, sure, maybe not this part. But there was a shift emotionally after a while where I started realizing that I was doubting some of the core fundamentals, regardless of, denomination or way of looking at it. Are there any big questions that kind of are weighing on you right now?
I mean, the direction of prayer kind of gets me. The idea that you have to pray east all the time to a giant black cube in the middle of the desert
Yeah.
doesn't really resonate with me all that much, to be honest.
That's fair.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have trouble. I keep bringing it back to other experiences just because that's how I relate. The idea of transubstantiation, of converting, crackers.
That's disgusting.
Right? It's cannibalism. It's Do you know the first time I brought that up to a family member who was a believer, the withering glare that I received was intense. But that was the only thing they had was a withering glare because there was nothing about that was defensible.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but Muslims don't believe in the crucifixion, at least not in the way the Christians do.
Right. I'm just giving a.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's where skepticism is so important. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get an answer given to you, but that why question. Why are we doing this? It's important.
Yeah.
It's really important.
And there's. Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello.
you're here.
Okay. Yeah, there's this whole tradition of collections of like oral traditions, stuff called hadith, where, Prophet Muhammad said this, Prophet Muhammad said that, and some of them are just, it's always been suspect, and that's where you get stuff about him marrying like a 6-year-old and
Yeah.
all the weird sort of stuff that people have to try to defend, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
some of that stuff is, some of that stuff's in the Quran too. It says Muhammad had wives and he had slaves, and that stuff is really troubling to me.
It sounds like there's a big kind of shift between this call and earlier calls that we've had.
I think I've just let these things bubble underneath the surface for a while, and they're kind of just coming to the forefront now.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And for what it's worth, this feeling of maybe doubt or fear or just anxiety around what is going to happen next is not only normal, it is good. This is you stretching muscles intentionally that maybe haven't had the opportunity to be worked on before, or at least not to this extent. So it is going to fucking hurt.
Yeah.
But that's not a bad thing.
It's not. And you don't need to come to a specific conclusion. We're not going to be like, oh, Sajid, you did it wrong. You didn't wind up exactly like us. The great thing is if atheists went door to door to try and convert people, it would just be a blank pamphlet.
Right.
Have you heard the nothing? Here you go. But because of that, the world is your oyster. If at any point, I know that there are so many things that are wrapped up in religion. There are, why you would view something as moral, what happens after you die, talking about grief and about justice and about ethics. A lot of that is based in there. Take your time and know that you can call at any point and we'd be happy to talk to you about it. Because if you're feeling this way, I guarantee you others are too. Actually, I know because I have.
Same.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, and I think just the most important thing here right now for me is to validate that hurt. It sucks. It feels like being lied to. And for me, I got really, really angry because I was like, how could you guys lie to me like that? Eventually, I came to the realization that they didn't think that they were lying, and that's almost worse because it's perpetrated, and yet you don't always have someone to blame,
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where I fit in the world and because I feel like I can't really connect to a lot of Muslims very well in the
Yeah. And that is a really hard part. The community loss that happens, not even when you actually leave, if you leave, but just if you aren't quite feeling it in the same way, or if there are just additional questions that make other people uncomfortable when you ask them, that divide just kind of happens, right? And it doesn't need to be a, I don't believe anymore, goodbye forever kind of deal. A lot of the time it's just a slow, steady kind of drifting apart, and that can be so lonely.
Yeah, I actually don't have a Muslim community at the moment, but
Yeah.
so that's yeah.
But what kind of communities can you reach for? Do you have hobbies? Do you have things that you're interested in? Places where you can go? It is important to seek those
Actually,
out.
I've struggled a lot with mental health, and I actually ended up being hospitalized for quite a bit of last year. That was hard, but I do have some community opportunities I can start delving into in my city.
Good.
Yeah.
It's really worth it. It
'Cause
feels awful.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't want to live in a bubble. This is why I call into your show. This is why I want to. I don't want to be closed-minded, and I don't want to be just pumping my head with things that agree with me. You know?
That is such a incredible trait to have.
It is.
And we picked up on that. The very first time you called, we had quite a few differences of opinion, and you just were a really good conversationalist, and you listened and you gave your thought out responses, and it was a lot of fun for us, and we would love to have you continue to call back. That skepticism, that desire to grow and expose yourself to new areas that maybe you weren't allowed to explore before, or didn't even maybe think to explore before, is the exciting thing about being a human. Like, that is such an incredible journey that you're about to go on, and that you're currently on. I do want to make sure that I do shout out Recovering from Religion.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of that, Sajid?
Yes.
Okay.
I definitely know it's international, and for people who haven't heard of Recovering from Religion, they can go to www.recoveringfromreligion.org. There is a toll-free number, 184-I-DOUBT-IT, and it is a peer support line for people who are having questions but not having anybody to talk to be able to call in and talk to somebody without being judged.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, well, to be frank about it, there's a lot of fucked up shit in religion.
Yeah, there is.
Yep.
But we're glad that you're here, and we're glad that you're working through it, and it hurts, but there is another side. There is a bright side at the end of the tunnel, I promise you.
I just want to say one more thing before we wrap it up.
Yeah.
I noticed when I've watched the calls back on video that you guys have a cat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm holding the cat right
And
now.
This is one tradition about Islam I like, is that the cat in Islam is seen as a very good animal, very pure, very clean animal, very well-respected animal. So a lot of Muslims own a cat.
I follow a couple TikTokers who are Muslim and own cats, and it's like one of the cutest things I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, I think we can agree on that part for sure.
Yeah, we love our cat. Sajid, thank you for calling, and as you work through it and you maybe bump up against something, give us a call and we'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Oh, I definitely feel better than I did before I called this morning. So.
Good.
Yay!
That's
Good.
amazing. Yeah, call back. We
Thank you so much.
can talk through any questions you've got.
Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.
Take care. I just want to hug him.
Yeah.
You know, how many people in a conversation, for those of you who haven't watched other clips with Sajid, go back and watch them, because how many people sit there and go, you know what, I haven't thought about that. Let me look that up. Let me think about that.
And a lot of the times, and here is a question, here's something to say as well, which is, for some of the clips with Sajid and with other repeat theist callers, we get, the question, well, why are you talking to this person? Why are you giving them the time of day? Why are you validating their experience? Like, shut them down, shut them up, and make them go away. And this is why we don't do that. Because a lot of the time, if a theist is calling into the show repeatedly, there is some reason why that goes beyond just like, oh, I want to talk more about this. It will ultimately help both us to help to humanize the people on the other side, and hopefully also help them kind of maybe have some of these doubts that have been brewing in the background come to the forefront, like with Sajid. So
yeah. Could you imagine if we had been adversarial from the start and been like, well, let me tell you why you're wrong.
Yeah.
Whether or not it would have felt comfortable just working through that stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. We have, we've got a religious caller who wants to talk about the cultural acceptance of bad things like founding fathers of the United States owning slaves. And I don't know where the religious element is, but my interest is piqued.
Well, this is Connor.
Oh.
So.
Okay. Let's go. Let's talk to Connor. Connor in Texas. You're live with Eric and V.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Doing well. So what about the founding fathers?
Well, so first off, I want to say that it's not really a religious thing. It's a type of argument, and that was the example I was going to use to start off with, that I wanted to hear y'all's thoughts on.
Okay.
So y'all know that whenever this comes up, people will, so with the example with the founding fathers, like there are people who will use it, who will say they use the example as a pseudo defense that, we look at it now as a bad thing, but then they'll use this defense like at the time, whether or not they did or did not see it as a bad thing, and it was acceptable at the time. And the question is, how do you respond when someone brings that up, or what is just y'all's thoughts on when someone brings that up?
Sure.
That it was acceptable at the time, even though it's not now.
Yeah, the context that this usually gets brought up in is one, like let's go with slavery, right? If we were to say, hey, is the Christian God pro-slavery? Because there are definite rules in the Old Testament about how to treat and own your slaves. And the response is, oh, well, it was, it was acceptable at the time. But if you believe in a God that is unchanging, that has perfect morals, that have always been perfect, then what was acceptable at the time doesn't matter. So if we were talking about, anyone else, then yeah, contextualizing things helps us understand them better. But if you're talking about a perfect God, there's a problem there, and that's usually the context. I
wasn't trying to bring religion into this.
Oh no, it's just that's usually the context I find this discussion happening in. Is people saying, oh well, I can justify. You're talking to counter apologists, of course. That's where we go with it.
Yeah, because the thing is, this is more like people who are the. I guess they put on their patriot blinders when stuff like this comes up, and this is the kind of stuff they go to. Yeah.
The way I think about it, or the first thing that I say is, I'm pretty sure the people who were being enslaved thought it was a bad thing. Like when you talk about, well, like that's the problem with the question ultimately is, when you talk about, well, did they know that it was bad? And like, was it known societally that this was wrong? There is always another side to that equation, which is, yes, it was known that it was wrong because it was actively harming people. And it's telling that you equate society and what society thinks to the enslavers as opposed to the enslaved. So in my experience, we need to shift the conversation into, all right, why were we listening to the people who were saying it was okay versus the people who obviously knew that it wasn't?
Right.
That's
Yeah. Do you have a different take on it?
Nope.
well,
It was just something I thought about. I was curious, like, how could someone possibly see it that way? I mean, I try to understand why someone would try and make that argument, but it's always just like, I just can't wrap my mind around trying to say that myself. Like,
I mean, putting on my religious hat, when I was a believer, I was told, well, it stood the test of time. If something is transcendently, reliable as a source for knowledge and ethics and yada yada yada, then it should be. It should have stood the test of time. It wasn't until much later that I realized that an appeal to the age of a thing is just a fallacy. But for a lot of people who
it's
don't,
basically someone saying tradition for tradition's sake.
and now I have the song.
Is that what you're saying?
No.
am I going nuts?
What?
Isn't the entirety of our ongoing conversation about progressive revelation and the fact that you think that there are traditional things that are required to be upheld? Like, I'm sorry, I'm just very confused that you don't understand that argument.
If you want me to clear that up, it's that we should not accept something just because it has always been around.
Okay.
If that's where you want to go with this.
Well, not necessarily.
Where,
like, I will accept that. That is your take on it. What I'm curious about is, why is progressive revelation different than saying, well, they didn't know better at the time, even though it was still bad at the time?
Wait, hold on a second. I'm sorry, I'm trying to make connections here, but my brain's just not getting there.
I'm happy to rephrase. Our conversations have talked about the dispensation of knowledge of morality over time, correct? We've talked about how people get progressive revelation according to the Baha'i faith, right?
Yeah, we use progressive as in, like, continuation.
Okay, but there was like a before time and then an after time when something was considered moral versus not moral, right?
Okay, I think that sounds about right.
Okay, so I'm just confused because that's where I thought you were, but now you're saying you don't understand why someone would make the argument that owning slaves was okay at one point because it was considered culturally acceptable. Like, doesn't that sound like the same thing?
That's what
my original question was about, like, when someone is in defense of the founding fathers and how they own slaves, that's what they would bring up.
I've seen it brought up that way. But I am curious how you don't view that as a problem with what you believe. Or do you? Are you calling to say that you've found a problem with the Baha'i faith and are kind of wanting to share that?
Oh, no, this was its complete own thing. Completely separate.
Well, it definitely sounds like you have two thoughts that can't live together at the same time in your mind. That's cognitive dissonance. How do you resolve that?
Could you clarify what you mean? Like what you're thinking right now?
Sure. Actually, I think V will probably be more concise.
I mean, I'll try. So I've got two different subjects, right? You called in before.
No, I understand cognitive dissonance.
No, right. I'm going into these topics specifically. in the past,
Right.
you've called in about revelation, morality, how things are continual and people are, revealed the next level of moral evolution or whatever. I don't know if that's the exact terminology, but there is an understanding there that at one point, people who you consider to be good were doing not good things because they didn't know better. Whereas on this call, you're saying you don't understand why people would think that the founding fathers were good while they were owning slaves because they didn't know better, right? That is the dissonance right there, because you can't say you don't understand one and also hold the same view elsewhere.
I'm trying to think of what in our previous calls, like how it. So
Really?
I'll probably just try to clarify with that we're taught not to accept something just because it has always been around. For us, it's the tradition for tradition's sake should not be the reason why we do something or follow something. That's the way, and that we should investigate everything on an individual basis
Okay.
to check it for its own pros and cons.
As
Okay.
long as
Or
you
if
don't
it's merit.
change anything based on our past conversation. Our literal entire last call was about you saying it's okay to question as long as you don't change shit, because the Universal House of Justice has decided that certain things are important or should stick around, which to
They
me,
didn't decide it.
Okay.
I can't do this all over again.
Okay, yeah. So you know where we're going to go with that. Connor,
Yeah.
do you think your God has become a better or worse person, in quotes? Is more or less moral now than before?
What's the could you please specify the time, like how far back in time you're discussing? I just want to make sure I understand you properly.
Sure. Slaves.
You're going back to slavery in the Old Testament?
Sure. Or we could go back to, I don't know, when women had even less rights. Like, has your God changed their mind about any of those things?
I'm trying to figure out how to summarize this, what is essentially a long conversation.
Usually when somebody gives that answer, it's because they're having to do a really, really large set of flexing
Mental gymnastics?
Yes, thank you.
Well,
That usually happens when you need a lot of mental gymnastics. The long story. Usually,
well, I'm not trying to do mental gymnastics. It's just that there are different components that work together on this, and I'm not trying to get out of this. It's just I don't want to take up too much of your time as well. But I'm also not like the best communicator, as y'all are aware of.
you seem fine.
And
Heck, you're getting to words faster than I am, so you're doing fine.
all right, let's try and restart on your ends.
Actually,
Could you just,
let's
say it again. Your thought.
Sure. Has your God become more or less moral over time?
So, from the understanding that
Well,
we have in the faith, is that God itself has remained the same.
Okay.
But what the teachings are brought, whatever they are at the time that they are sent, typically start at one level
Okay. So
to do some work to build up
Right.
to
Right.
improve society,
So
and
if-
then it's slow improvement with each message sent.
Right. So if I wanted to be a really good neighbor, but I'm going to start off by throwing motor oil on their front lawn, you got to recognize that I'm actually not a bad person, and I wouldn't actually do that. that doesn't make any sense. That makes absolutely zero sense.
Well, I mean, the first star would probably stop throwing the motor oil on the lawn.
Well, I'm talking about the good.
It's a first step. It's kind of like a
No, hold on a second.
Over
Hold
a long
on.
period of time.
I think we're not at the same level here. I'm talking about the God, not the God's commandments at this point, right? If I am a really great person, but what I'm telling you to do is fucking awful, then I don't know how you get off saying that I'm a really great person. It just doesn't work that way.
That brings up another nuance. That brings up a whole nother conversation on whether or not every single thing is
Well, it sounds like you're trying to dismiss it with broad strokes.
I'm not trying to dismiss it. I'm trying to. It's difficult to try and be nuanced and direct at the same time.
I don't think it's nuance. I think it's gymnastics.
I'm sure there's nuance there, but I think that we've had this conversation so many times, and I'm honestly just kind of confused about why you can explain that and then say, but I don't understand why people culturally accept things that are bad. Right? You understand that that is the same line of reasoning.
You know, I see why you say that, and it was something I thought of, like, oh, this might come up this way, but I didn't really have time to think over it.
Well, you led with it.
Well, now that we've brought it up and you're thinking over it, what are your thoughts there? Is that cognitive dissonance for you? Can you understand why people would make that argument?
No, I can understand why you'd make the argument. It's just
it's not convincing.
I'm trying to think. No, I'm trying to think on the spot of like how to go into this.
We should have like a little timer that comes up on the screen.
Yeah.
Like, click, click, click.
So the thing is I really want to give Connor the chance to respond, but I know that thinking about it is important, but that, I don't know, maybe we should pick this back up.
Here's the thing. If you do not understand why people make excuses for people that they, idolize for being good people in a bad system, then by definition, you cannot understand the crux of your own religious morality. If you can understand your own religious morality as you have explained it to us, then you can understand that argument. And what's more, you should be convinced by it.
Yeah.
So you're in a little bit of a pickle here. And I understand you need to take some time to think it over. Please do. Please call back and we'll talk about this exact crux where you're not convinced of a thing that convinces you.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Take care, Connor.
Thank you.
I got a little confused there.
I mean, same, but probably for different reasons. Like, I personally, that would be like saying a core fundamental piece of my understanding of the world is that the sky is blue, right? I'm going back to the color of the sky.
Sure.
Throw back to last week. And then you call in again after having an entire argument about how you believe the sky is blue to say, there are these weird people who make the argument that the sky is blue, and I just don't get it. And so either there is a core piece that I am missing that has not been communicated about why these people's claims that the sky is blue is ridiculous and laughable, but yours is okay. Or you have to reconcile with the fact that by your own definition, you should agree with these people who are making some pretty awful claims. The thing for me on that is I do remember being faced with problems in my faith and ignoring them and hearing why they were wrong and just making myself not really just quashing those thoughts. And then every time they came up, it needed to be addressed over and over again. I think that was actually one of the reasons why shows like this was important for my process,
because I needed to keep hearing it over and over again. I needed to keep challenging those ideas until it finally sunk in that there's something that needs to be explored there.
And while I am happy to talk to repeat theist callers even about the same thing over and over again, the really cool thing about this format is that you can go back and watch your own conversations over again before you call back, so that even if you've repressed the fact that it was uncomfortable to talk about, you have an understanding that you called in and we had a 45-minute conversation about this exact topic 2 weeks ago.
True enough. Okay, well, I know I inflicted that on us. Who are we talking to next?
Let's speak to Mike in Massachusetts.
Ooh, it says the most skeptical person he knows is also a theist. How can two skeptical people come to different conclusions? That is a good conversation topic. Mike, you're live with Eric and V.
Hi, La Murph.
Hello. So
Not enough people picked up on that. Like, I appreciate the fact that you used Lemurf.
yeah, I mean that is the phone number. That's why some people 585 Lemurf.
Yep.
Anyway, Mike.
I hope that was a nickname, yeah.
Yeah. So Mike, the most skeptical person you know is religious. Is that about it?
And that is precisely, I got to give props to the screener. She was able to summarize it much better than I could.
Yep, Z is really good at that. Mike, what do you want to talk about regarding the your theist and skepticism and how two people come to different conclusions?
Well, the difficulty is that she's family. And it's lately become another bone of contention. I've known that she was a theist for a while. But I guess, honestly, it came news to me as over COVID, I've had a real sort of awakening of my own skepticism and atheist urges and so forth and so on, and so I've sort of done the deep dive in my own brain.
That's the thumbnail text.
Atheist urges.
Atheist urges. We can make it OnlyFans. Call it atheist urges. I like it.
Sorry, go on.
No problem. Over the course of the last couple months, we were just having a conversation, and I try, as far as my mom goes, we pretty much have the agreement that we don't talk religion because she knows what I think and I knows that I know what she thinks, and never the twain shall meet.
Yeah.
She's a devout Catholic, and I am kind of a devout anti-theist that, that doesn't exist, but, you get the idea. But so we just don't talk about it. But I was mentioning to my sister that this has driven a bit of a wedge between me and my mom. It makes it harder to find stuff to talk about. And she said, oh, well, I guess that's something I've always agreed with Mom on, that there is a God.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, oh, dear. I didn't say that. I said, okay. And in this more recent conversation, just to try and prune this story here, in this more recent conversation, she was discussing the drought in Colorado. She lives out near Denver. And she said, yeah, every day I pray for rain. And I just sort of went, oh, what can I say to that?
So how's that working?
I don't
know.
I wanted to say that, but that would have straight up been antagonistic,
Fair.
It would have been just asking for an argument, and we've had plenty of those.
I just have such a sarcastic relationship with my siblings about everything that probably I'm a bad. Like, people legitimately think that we dislike each other because the second we get around, we're just like, oh, well, that was brilliant. That was really smart of you. Just right off the bat. But
we have some of that. I think we have we can get along on that level on some topics, but I guess when it gets to really fundamental issues, I just don't know. And it seems like, well, we can't both be skeptics, or we can't both be right, or...
So
is there something wrong with my own skepticism and that I'm not able to argue with her better,
No.
etc.?
No.
I think I do want to just jump on something real fast because it's going to be non-applicable in 2 seconds. I think that the kind of format that we engage in and the kind of format that skepticism became a mainstream word on makes it seem like in order to be a good skeptic, you have to be able to debate or have like aggressive conversations with people or even articulate effectively every time you talk, and none of those are true. You can absolutely be a skeptic and, run the other direction in the face of confrontation. Like, they're totally separate things. So just wanted to get that out of the way.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
So
Food for thought right there.
So I think the way that I would deal with it with my family is I would hang a bell on it or hang a lantern on it. I would say, hey, that actually makes me feel pretty weird. I would love to talk to you. I would love to talk to you about this, about the whole religion thing and your God beliefs, because that's not where I'm at. And I think that'd be a really fun conversation to have with you. And if she's like, no, I'm not interested, then what I would do is next time praying for rain works, I'd be like, oh, well, then I would start being sarcastic, Have you sent any donations for aid? No? You just prayed?
Geez, for the droughts, I did send some wildfire donations around California a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I have not personally sent drought relief, no.
Well, no, but if somebody's saying, oh, I'm praying all the time, oh, what are your actions? What are you doing about it?
I see. I understand. Okay.
And if they go, oh, well, I'm praying. Oh, you want to have that conversation? If you want to have that conversation, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Do you want to have that conversation? But what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't allow them to continue to push a religious narrative unchallenged. But if they don't want to be challenged on it, then you give them the option. Hey, we can have that conversation if you want. If you don't, then I think that's a pretty dumb idea. But I'm not going to tell you why, because you don't want to have that conversation with me.
That sounds pretty perfect.
Don't go with the dumb idea. You know your sister better than I do. But I mean, really, honestly, if she's going to give something like that, then give a teaser. Hey, I would be really, really curious to know how you think that's helping people. If you want to have that conversation with me, this religious thing is something that I would love to talk to you about. But what I would not do, and this is you and anybody that's listening, if you think that surprising someone with a religious, philosophical conversation that they don't want to have is going to be helpful, you are going to damage that relationship.
Has been done. Has already been done. And this is part of why I'm concerned.
Yeah. So definitely hang a lantern on it and be like, hey, I'd love to have this conversation with you. And if they don't want to, fine. But anytime they say, oh, well, I'm praying. Oh, what did you do though? Well, I prayed. Oh, well, if you want to have that conversation, let's have that conversation. Oh, you don't? Okay.
Wow. Just making it that option for her.
Yeah. And if that way, number one, you're speaking up. You don't have to feel like you got to be quiet. But at the same time, you're letting them know that if they are going to do that, then what they are doing is entering into that conversation with you. And that's fine. But that's what's going on. I've had way too many people tell me, oh, I'm praying for you, and me going, actually, I don't feel comfortable with that. Oh, that's you. I really don't need to hear that from you. Oh, well, then fucking knock it off. So
I'd really rather have a cup of coffee, but whatever.
Yeah. I don't know. That's worked for most of my family. It has not worked for all of my family. There are some people who just are not interested in a relationship with me. So I'm an asshole on the internet. Don't let me ruin your family. You know what's right for you. Talk to a therapist if you want, because they can help you come up with some awesome tailored strategies that we could have. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question, Mike?
Absolutely.
What makes you say that your sister is a skeptic?
That's an interesting question. Maybe it's just sort of her personality as separate from mine. I've always thought of her as the more analytic, and I've been the more emotional. That by itself might be me wildly generalizing how our thoughts work. But I've always thought of her as very grounded by her thoughts and what seemed to make sense.
That's interesting.
Rather than being driven by her emotions so much. And I'm bipolar, so I know all about being driven by your emotions. But that's another story. So
just because somebody is a believer doesn't mean that they're being driven by their emotions. They could be using the rationality that they have available to them, right? We don't necessarily know what's in her toolbox, and she can have a tool that is absolutely allowing for that belief, not recognizing that that tool is not a great tool. So I definitely would not excuse that as, an emotionally motivated thing, but as what is in that person's toolbox? How are they understanding the world around them? And what rationality and logic did they use to get there? And why is that different from mine? That might be a more beneficial and more charitable approach.
Well, I think what Mike was saying was that his sister strikes him as very analytical, and he is the emotional one. And so looking at her, he thinks, oh, she must be skeptical. Maybe she is approaching things from a skeptical point of view because she comes across as analytical. Oh,
I was taking it as she always struck me as the skeptical one, but now she's a believer, and so how do we wind up in this flip space?
No, I think again, the call out I gave at the beginning kind of still applies, where there is a stereotype of what a skeptic acts like or presents themselves like, and there is a very big difference between thinking things through and being maybe a little reserved or analytical and practicing skepticism. One of them is a way of, being in the world, and another is, like you said, a toolbox, a toolkit. So I think you were spot on in saying that probably, Mike, your sister is using her toolkit in a very analytical and rational way that can come across as skeptical, But if her toolkit is not a skeptical toolkit, then she isn't a skeptic. So I think there's the only reason I bring this up is because I heard some insecurity in your question about, am I skeptical enough? Maybe I'm doing it wrong because of my, feelings of emotion or whatever. And I do want to validate the fact that somebody who is emotional can also be the most skeptical person in the room.
Yeah.
Again, those are two completely different things. So as you're engaging with her, I would encourage you to continue treating her like she is a skeptical person, because it's a good thing to assume about a person until proven otherwise. But I would also encourage you to maybe have her take a look inside of her toolbox about things other than religion and see, can she start adding things in there or replacing things that aren't serving her very well? Because it sounds like from your description of her, she might really appreciate building it out and actually learning some new techniques.
I think that is probably right. I mean, she works in IT. It's not like she is just forsaken science or anything ridiculous like this. It's, she's just a lot more moderate than I am, than I happen to be politically and so forth. But if such is life.
If our last caller was any indication, people are amazingly able to compartmentalize things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thanks for calling, Mike. I think that this was a really good kind of clarifying conversation to have. Being skeptic generation, we do want to make sure that we are being clear about what skepticism is and where it can get you. So, thank you.
That's great. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Okay. there's a call that I saw. It's finding balance between healthy skepticism and maintaining an open mind. And I have so many questions about what an open mind means in this case, because like I don't see any problem with that, and so I got to know where Nathan's going with it. Nathan is in Australia. Nathan, you're live with Eric and V.
Happy to be here with you both.
Hey,
I adore both your personalities and wits.
Oh well, thank you, Nathan. What time is it over there?
Oh, dude, it is 4:40 in the a.m.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Thank you for waiting. Thank you
My
for.
brain is still working, thankfully.
Okay.
But
Oh my gosh.
Let's jump right into it then.
yeah, let's delve in. Like, I mean, I could go so many different places with the thought process that is involved. Because I left the question quite broad, as you can tell.
Yeah. Do you think there's a problem? Oh, I was going to say, do you think that there's a problem that's causing an imbalance between skepticism and open-mindedness?
I wouldn't describe it as a problem, no. And I did kind of answer that when you kind of introduced it just before you kind of logged me in. So, yeah, not necessarily a problem. I just kind of thought it would be, I guess, a good intellectual territory to kind of explore with you guys, because I don't really get to be challenged on a lot of this stuff that, let me kind of preface it with, I quit alcohol and joined AA a bit over 3 years ago, right?
Okay.
And and being a skeptic and, human and secular, I have adopted a kind of spiritual outlook to life, but it's still nothing in comparison to pretty much every person I come across in life who is just has really nothing. Well, they just believe a lot more nonsense than what I do, and so it's really hard to kind of have to find a peer group to really explore and challenge me on some of these views that I have. They're mainly rooted in psychology, though. So, but yeah, I'd love to. I've written a few notes, but it's kind of just to decide where to kind of go with it. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of just explore. I don't know. Do you kind of maybe want to?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So
something for me to kind of riff on.
Yeah. So the healthy skepticism, I think, a lot of people will equate that, especially people who aren't familiar with skepticism, will equate that with either pessimism or cynicism. Thank you, and not really, being open to new ideas. But the fact is, it's just asking why, and if there are good answers to the why, then you're on the right path. If you are, if you're having trouble finding people though to kind of talk to you about that, keep looking. Like, it took me years. I wound up needing to move halfway across the country to find people to kind of do that.
Yeah,
with.
For sure. Yeah. Well, hopefully when I don't know, publish my book and stuff, I'll have people kind of, coming to me and stuff. Not marketing it here or anything, but yeah, you have opened up a bit of a trajectory there that I could kind of walk down with you. Just in regards to, I find that conversations with people I do enjoy, I guess and I find them conversations with people interesting, just in the challenge it takes for me to kind of explain or meet them where they're at and trying to kind of fit, and that's kind of like an exciting challenge to get to know them enough to explain a concept in terms that they will understand. Like, I mean, that's kind of one of the kind of fun things about it. But but this is still really, really superficial entry level stuff. You know?
No, Nathan. So it sounds like what the question is how do you balance your skepticism against other people's open minds? Is that better? Is that more accurate?
Oh, look. It's way too much to unpack in one conversation. So I think maybe, that is really broad. It opens up so many different examples that I can kind of.
Then let me get a little more specific. Yeah, let me get a little more specific.
Sure.
Do you think that being a skeptic is getting in the way of you having an open mind?
I think you're heading in the right direction here of kind of what I was kind of thinking when I wrote the question, right? So, yes and no, right? Because what kind of comes to mind is when I've been criticised for not having an open mind, where it's just like I find that delving deeper into that evidence is such a beautiful kind of like awe-inspiring. Experience. Okay. But,
so you're being accused of not having an open mind, and you're feeling like you're trying to balance that against skepticism. Is that it?
Oh, it's come up. I wouldn't say it's something that I regularly come across, but
okay. Did you have anything?
I mean, I think that Nathan, what I really want to do with you is go to a book club and read Andrew Newberg. Right? Like, I want to read Your Brain on God, right? I want to read these books about neurotheology and discuss them with you, but that wouldn't make for really good TV. So
in the future though, if you've got something specific, like, hey, my friend is really into Reiki,
sorry, Eric.
What
about
I was going to say, if you have it's the delay because Australia. Got it. Yeah. Okay. So no. I was going to say, if you have a friend who's really into Reiki or crystal healing or something like that, and they're like, man, you're just being an asshole. You don't have an open mind, and you want to call and talk about that. I think that'd be great. When we've got specifics like that, then we can kind of dive in. But when it's more general, it is difficult to get anything to latch onto.
Okay. I think so. I could, maybe ego, right? So. I'm really kind of more into psychology, where that there, I suppose, with Freud and stuff, a lot of his kind of theories where people would look at and go, oh, well, your evidence doesn't really back it up, and there's kind of like a lot of intuition that's kind of being sought as evidence. And I think, that to me, that's a conversation that I have been having quite often, that I might need a bit of clarity moving forward with some of those kind of if contrasting butt heads with, say, philosophy versus psychology. You know what I mean? It's like butt heads quite a bit.
Maybe if you have a specific that you want to boil down to one thing, then call in next time and we'll handle that specific. I think we spent a good amount of time trying to drill down, and if you're able to kind of give us something that's a little more direct and tangible, we're going to be able to we'll be able to get to the meat a lot faster.
Well, I can do that now, but if you kind of feel like we've filled up too much space already,
we got 12 minutes and one other caller.
Yeah, I want to be considerate of others and all that.
Even though it's 4:30 in the morning.
5 pages of notes, and I know there's something in it, but that it pretty much does point to exactly what you're asking for. But I'll call in again because I'm excited because it's my first time, and I don't usually stay up this late. And
that's insane.
4:49 in the morning early, but
my goodness.
We appreciate you calling and
get some sleep.
Yeah, definitely get some rest. Take care.
Yeah.
I feel like Nathan had so much to talk about that. And you know what? Honestly, I get that a lot with people. Sometimes I call it popping the cork.
Uh-huh.
When you have somebody who has all of these things to talk about and they don't get the chance to, then they get the opportunity to. And it's like, oh my gosh, I want to talk about everything.
Yeah.
It totally makes sense. And I definitely want to encourage people to find those groups that they can talk about those things, because it's fantastic, but it's not always going to lend itself well to the call-in format.
Yeah, we have a Discord, we have a Facebook as well, and we have tons of people who have similar experiences of, going through AA as a secular person, and just having these conversations about the psychology of belief and religion and all of that. You will find, people to have those conversations with as well.
Yeah, and I know we're going to get to the super chats, but there is somebody in South Australia who's saying reach out to them. So if you're still watching, check that out. Let's see. Did we want to take one more call, or are we?
Yeah, let's touch on Stephen real fast.
Okay. It feels like it's such a big topic.
Well, it is continuing from last week, so hopefully we can dive straight in.
Okay. Do you want to preface this? Because I know that you were...
Yeah. So, Stephen, welcome. You're going to want to kind of continue last week's call around legislating morality, and maybe, what are good reasons to make laws versus less good reasons to make laws. And we only have a couple minutes, but we did want to make sure you got airtime.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I enjoy your work very much. So thank you for what you're doing. You had some great topics today. Before I jump in, and I promise I will and do it quickly, but I wanted to say what you do is so important because you're modeling for other people, not just about the atheism, but you started off with the polyamory, and as someone on the queer spectrum, that did a lot for our rights and our acceptance and all of those things. And I think what you do is so important, and it ties in to the atheism, because I think it also dovetails into this whole legislation idea, which was the topic that you all posted on YouTube, and why I gave my topic.
Yeah.
I think faith feels good, and I think when we're very tribal as humans, so we want to make everybody think the way we do so that everybody becomes predictable. And that's what I think goes behind a lot of really bad legislation. It's not just common sense things. We can all agree not to steal from each other or kill each other or touch each other in bad places. We can all agree to those things being bad. But when we go beyond that and we're not actively protecting society, we're getting into, I need you to think like me so I know how you're going to behave. And I feel like that umbrella is like everything that I've heard today from Sajid and being worried about his community and acceptance and so forth, and being open. Mike in Massachusetts and his sister. I have a sister who is religious. Just a quick story. My niece, her daughter, came out to me as an atheist. And I was very impressed by that because I had no influence on that decision. And she told her mom, and my sister said, well, your uncle's an atheist, and he's a good man, so it's okay. So that's why I say that modeling is important, to break down those fears and make everybody, if we're all just good to each other, we don't have to worry about a lot of these things. And if we don't get into each other's business and judge on things that are none of our business, we do better. So,
Stephen, where's your show?
Yeah, I was going to say, you have so perfectly end capped this episode.
plus your pacing is phenomenal.
Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I grew up as a devout Catholic, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But what I found really interesting, again, one more thing about being open, the girl I was confirmed next to, we sat next to each other in the pew. After we became adults, we both became atheists and found this whole atheist community from our Catholic church.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't know if it was a reflection on that particular parish or what, but the idea is if you put yourself out there and you model yourself as a good, caring, compassionate person, community-minded. I have all these thoughts on community, too, from that coming up, because as an LGBT person, we had to learn to make our own communities away from the communities we came from, at least when I was young. I'm not young anymore. I've been an atheist for a very long time. Everybody's at their own place on their journey. Everybody's good. Everybody asking questions, that's great. But what you guys do is just so super important, and I just felt like my option or my topic wasn't as important as saying that, because you guys have done a great job this hour. So thank you. Or hour and a half.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stephen.
Stephen, I needed that.
Moko
Thank you.
wasn't enough, is what you're telling me.
Oh, Moko's going to love me regardless.
Stephen, thank
well,
you
you're
so
polyamorous,
much.
so other people will too. So
There you
there
go.
you go.
Damn straight. And you know what? I hear that getting snipped looks really good on Tinder.
Looks real. That resume is just getting built
Right?
out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks for calling in,
I
Stephen.
have
Thank you so much.
Sure. No problem. You have a great week.
You
You
too.
too.
What a sweetheart.
Oh my gosh. I just want to say, like, I was all ready to get into the topic, and I hope that we still do get to talk about it at some point, because the idea that I just need to know how you're going to behave as a motive for legislating morality is kind of a game changer in the way I think about things. Not necessarily on the structural level, but on the individual level, like why an individual might support things that just feel wrong. Like, how could you want to support this? If the goal is that comfort and that ability to be like, I know what you're going to do, so I feel safer.
Yeah.
Mind blown. I love that.
I think we're going to be having that conversation after the show.
It's very possible we are.
All right. So I think it's time to move on to Super Chats.
Sounds good.
All right. Our first Super Chat is from King Nick, 1994, sent 10 pounds. Thank you. Or sent 10 euros. Sorry. I'm back from a holiday enforced 2-week break in my SkepGen content. Great show so far. Love both you guys. As someone who's always planning to get snipped, I will be interested to hear Eric's experience. I signed. Yeah. I'm going to be sharing my experience. Yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah,
I
tune
will
in
let you
next
know
week,
next week.
for all the dirty details.
With ice on my groin, we'll do our best.
Oh my gosh. And then Auspician sent 10 Australian dollars and says, "Hey Nathan, I'm an SA, contact me." So Nathan, if you are still listening or if you rewatch, people want to get in touch with you. People want to be part of the conversation that you started. So definitely reach out.
It's funny. It seems like there are some episodes where we are pushing just aggressively back at really bad ideas, and other times, like this week, it feels like we are really kind of seeking to understand. And I really like the way Stephen put that we're trying to model what we want to see.
Yeah.
And that just makes me feel good. It's going to give me warm fuzzies for the rest of the day. But we're all glad you're here. We're glad you made it with us. Thank you, and until next time,
We're glad we had this talk.